If you don't know me, my name is Allison Camardella, and I am the president of North Shore CASA. Tonight we are all here to learn about fentanyl. Try as we might, I'm afraid that this is a topic that has become impossible to ignore. Here are some facts. The US topped over 100,000 overdose deaths in 2021. Fentanyl has become the #1 killer in the age group of 18 to 45. A 13-year-old boy in Hartford just died in January, and between the school and his home, he was in possession of 140 bags of fentanyl. And add to that the Surgeon General has declared a youth mental health emergency in the United States. So this all adds up to an environment that is cause for increased vigilance on the part of parents and schools. I say vigilance because at North Shore CASA, we're not here to instill fear in all the hearts of parents so much. I'm a mom of 3 teenage boys, and I don't want to parent out of fear. That's not my goal. But what I do is I have honest conversations with my kids. We talk about substances, and I give them as much information that's age appropriate that I can. And that is what we are here to do, to give you the information that you need so that you can then take it home and have real conversations with your children. So North Shore CASA puts on these events so that we can all speak a common language of prevention in this community. So I hope tonight that you will walk away with the answers to the following questions. What is fentanyl? Where is it found? What are the risks? What is our district doing to educate our kids on fentanyl? And most importantly, how to talk to your child about fentanyl when you get home. And I implore you, if at the end of our presentation you don't feel like you have the answers to those questions, please raise your hand, please inquire, please ask questions, because we have a very, very bright panel who are more than prepared to answer your questions for you. And now just a quick plug about North Shore CASA. As I said earlier, we're made up of a very dedicated team of 9 board members, and we work together to reduce youth substance use and abuse, and they all deserve to be mentioned by name. We have myself, I'm the president, Kevin McGilloway is our vice president, Bruce Kennedy is our treasurer, Barbara Ann Panetta is our secretary, and the rest of the board is made up of Tom Berger, Stephanie Papiro, Dan McDermott, Alexa Traeger, and Tanaz Baluch. We are always very actively looking for volunteers, and in your hands tonight you should have a feedback form. So if you have a skill or a desire to help or just work a table when we have an event, please put your name down on the volunteer list and we will be sure to contact you. And finally, this is the part that my board tells me all the time that I don't do so well, so I'm going to put a little extra effort in. We are entirely 100% funded today by donations. That's it, just by donations. So and on top of that, we never, ever, ever charge. We've never charged for an education or prevention event to date. I believe that's correct. So if you're so inclined, I would really suggest that you go to our entrance table. We have a Venmo code there. We have the opportunity on our website, www.nscasa.org. You can donate through PayPal on there, and we really appreciate any support that you're able to give to us financially. So with that, we begin our night tonight with the film Dead on Arrival. And I'm going to give you a heads up that this film is powerful and it's deeply sad, as it directly deals with the loss that families have suffered at the hands of fentanyl. But we simply cannot sugarcoat the message that fentanyl is deadly and even just one pill can kill. So I give you Dead on Arrival. Thank Thank you. I know it's quite a film. But I think it answers a lot of questions and imparts a lot of real information about the seriousness of this topic and of this drug. So at this time, I'm going to invite our panelists to come up. We have tonight Lieutenant Matt Landman. He's the commanding officer of the Narcotics Vice Squad for the Nassau County Police Department. Please come up and join us. We have Dr. Zachary Olaf, who is a toxicologist in emergency medicine at North Shore University Hospital. We have Adam Birkenstock, who is a licensed clinical social worker and director of programming at LICAD, Long Island Council on Alcohol and Drug Dependence. And we have Dan Doherty, who is our head of counseling right here at North Shore Schools. So thank you and welcome to all, and let's jump right into our discussion. Lieutenant Landman, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, the film depicts a lot of different places where fentanyl has been found. Can you tell us, in your experience, if that is what you're seeing in Nassau County, in all of these different areas, cocaine, pills, and even potentially marijuana?
We're seeing fentanyl in everything now. If someone's doing heroin, it's not really heroin, it's fentanyl. There's fentanyl found in cocaine, there's fentanyl found in methamphetamines, and I think one of the biggest problems, if not the biggest problem we're having right now, is counterfeit pills, the pressed pills. We find them in numerous forms, particularly in oxycodone, and a little more troublesome is Xanax. People don't really think of Xanax as, and it's not as an opioid, and it's something that kids would take at a party and not even think twice about it. And a lot of the things I was going to talk about will cover in the film. You can't take any pill unless it's a prescription in your name that you got from a pharmacist, because there are not, if it's not a legitimate prescription, they're not real. They're counterfeit pills. Everything we're seeing nowadays is coming out counterfeit with fentanyl in it, and all the heroin we're getting, it's all coming back as fentanyl. And just a little bit more about it. I mean, obviously, they talked about it in the film. It's a synthetic opioid. It's 100 times stronger than morphine. There's other derivatives like carfentanil, which is 100 times stronger than fentanyl. So one tiny little speck of that would kill you. It's manufactured. You don't have to worry about a bad season in Afghanistan in the poppy fields. It's manufactured in Mexico. It's easy to ship. A kilo of fentanyl, which is roughly the size of a brick, let's say, can kill 500,000 people. Due to the potency of it, 1 kilo of fentanyl could be stretched to 25 kilos. So you could take 1 brick and 25 kilos of cutting agent and now make 25 kilos of fentanyl that can be distributed. It could be used to be packaged as heroin, that could be pressed into pills, and this is going everywhere. Now, 2 milligrams is considered a lethal dose. Just to put that in perspective, a packet of sugar is 1,000 milligrams. So a packet of sugar's worth of fentanyl could kill 500 people. Like I said, it's mixed with heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, pressed pills. 42% of counterfeit pills come back as having more than 2 milligrams of fentanyl in it. And like they touched on.
Just for clarification, so 42% of all the pills have a deadly dose of fentanyl in them? Is that accurate? Or it could be a deadly dose of fentanyl in them?
Of pills that were tested for fentanyl, 42% of them come back with more than having a fatal dose. And just not to bore with statistics, but in regards to fatal opioid deaths in Nassau County, in 2019, there were 161 fatal opioid deaths. 65% of those were from fentanyl. In 2020, there were roughly 200 fatal opioid deaths. 81% of them were fentanyl. Last year, slightly more, about 215 fatal opioid deaths, and 85% of those were from fentanyl. So the fentanyl is exploding here, and not just here, everywhere. There's even a few cases where we are finding marijuana laced with fentanyl. So, like they talked about in the film, it's not like 30 years ago when people were experimenting with drugs. The kids can't even experiment with anything now because anything and everything can have fentanyl in it. It's very scary, and it should be scary, and everybody should know about it. I wish every seat in this room was filled, and everybody in this room would tell 50 other people about it, because we really need to get the word out. I can speak from experience from the countless meetings I've been in with the Police Commissioner Ryder, and I know County Executive Lakeman, it's a top priority for them. They're working on an evening just like this with the county and the police department to get the fentanyl awareness out there on a broader scale. So this is a problem, a major problem here. It doesn't matter the community, it doesn't matter the age, it doesn't matter the sex, it doesn't matter what race, creed, or color. It affects everybody. Because if someone thinks they're taking cocaine and there's fentanyl in it, they're going to die. If someone thinks they're taking a Xanax pill and there's fentanyl in it, they're going to die. So it doesn't make a difference to the community, the color of their skin, their age, or their sex. It doesn't matter. It's everywhere, and it's affecting everybody.
Just as a quick follow-up, so the issue of, for example, a Xanax pill that has fentanyl in it, can you just clarify for the audience whether that's actually a Xanax pill that's laced with fentanyl or what it is?
So the person that sells it is probably not pressing the pill themselves. They're probably getting it from somewhere. But along the line, someone is pressing them into pills. They make pill presses. You can buy them on the internet. They're illegal to have, but you can buy them. So what they do is they mix it up in a bullet blender with cutting agent and the fentanyl, and they're not pharmacists, they're not scientists, and some pills they get it right, and some pills they don't. So some pills are all cutting agent, some pills are kind of just right, and some pills have too much fentanyl in it. So they're not real pills, and they're indistinguishable. Years ago, you might have been able to tell because the printing in it wasn't crisp, but now you can take a legitimate Xanax pill and a pressed Xanax pill, and you can't tell the difference. We have to physically test them to see, and send them for to the medical examiner's office for testing to truly see if there's fentanyl in it.
I just thought that was a very important point, that it may say Xanax on the pill, but it has nothing to do with Xanax. There's no Xanax in this pill. It's just a pill that has been created. It's a fentanyl pill that has Xanax stamped on it. So I just think that's an important point. Thank you, Lieutenant. Do you have any other comments right now that you want to share? Okay. All right, we'll come back to questions. I'm going to move to Dr. Olaf. Can you talk a little bit about what actually happens to the body, what is happening physically when somebody takes fentanyl, and what an overdose looks like?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So I work in the toxicology department for Northwell Health. So I'm an emergency room doctor, and I work, it's a subspecialty of emergency medicine is toxicology. So whenever there's any sort of overdose, withdrawal from medication, adverse effect from a medicine, we'll get a consult for that. So fentanyl has obviously risen to the forefront now as well. So in terms of what fentanyl actually does, so some of these, facts are thrown around, potency, like what does that mean? What does that mean when fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, carfentanil, remifentanil, all these other analogs? So the opiates affect our body in many different ways. We have receptors throughout our body for opiates. They're in our gut, they're in our spine, they're in our brain, they're everywhere. So in terms of this potency, what we're really, what's causing the deaths is the respiratory effects, our breathing. So right now, all of us, our body is just detecting different levels of gases, oxygen, carbon dioxide. So we breathe by ourselves, we don't have to think about it. Unfortunately, with opiates and then fentanyl being so potent, it blunts this respiratory response. So that's why in the film, when they gave all these horrible stories, the one about the the child Daniel turning blue in the lips, he's not breathing. So it affects your respiratory rate. Usually if you're low on oxygen, all these other factors, you're gonna breathe quicker, breathe deeper, but your body can't compensate. So you're gonna be sedated, and then you're not breathing, and this ultimately leads these patients to die and have very adverse outcomes. So we, working in the emergency department versus working as a toxicologist as well, it's kind of two different scenarios in which we see these patients. So in the emergency department, we're not seeing the acute overdose. These patients are already dead by the time they come to the hospital. So it's gonna be the police, it's gonna be EMS who sees these patients. They rarely make it to the hospital. It's a horrible story like we just went through. It's a parent finding someone, it's friends doing drugs together, and unfortunately there's an adverse outcome and they die. They rarely make it in. It's usually a call to pronounce a patient in the field is where we're getting most of our calls from for fentanyl. If a parent or a loved one or someone near them is lucky enough to have Narcan and they administer it, the story is very similar to what we just heard. It's, I thought I was taking a Xanax, I thought I was taking an Oxy, I don't know what happened, I woke up in the back of an ambulance. So that's when you kind of know that's not what they were taking, this is an adverse outcome, this was fentanyl. So, and then the second option is a toxicologist, what we're seeing these patients, and these are very sad outcomes. This is very similar to Daniel's case, where these patients, are anoxic, they have no oxygen to their brain for prolonged periods of time, they're young, so they have a lot of reserves, so they'll get pulses back in the field, after their parents or a friend finds them, on the ground unresponsive, and they're brain dead by the time they make it to the hospital, and we'll get consulted because the question from the family is inevitably, what happened? What did my kid take? What did my friend take? And we're put in a hard situation because fentanyl is not tested for in a hospital setting because it doesn't affect clinically what we're going to do. You test for different opiates, but not fentanyl. That's not something that's a point of care test. It's something that's going to be the medical examiner is ultimately going to find that out, or we have to send that to an outside lab. So all we can tell is that clinically this is fentanyl. They took a tablet, they lost their pulses, they stopped breathing, and so it's a very difficult conversation to have with family members, but all too common now. And there's been outbreaks in the past of people adulterating medications, for the longest period of time. There was China White in the 80s, Tango and Cash, which was different, fentanyl derivatives as well, but nothing to this level. Those were just like outbreaks in cities for a short period of time, but this is endemic now to the United States. It's in, New Jersey, New York, rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas, it's all walks of life. We're getting these consults for, we're seeing these patients from adverse outcomes.
Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned naloxone, and everybody in the audience tonight will have an opportunity at the end of the presentation to get naloxone training and bring naloxone home with them. Can you talk a little bit about what naloxone is and why it's so important for people to be trained?
Sure, absolutely. So naloxone is known by the trade name of Narcan as well. Probably a lot of people have, seen it in TV shows, maybe in person. You can buy it, at pharmacies now as well. Can give intranasally, you can give it in the muscles, you can give it via IV, but what everyone will be trained in is intranasal, so it's right in the nose. So it works on the same receptors as the opiates, so for fentanyl, for morphine, for heroin, it's the same receptors, so it blocks this and reverses the effects. So if you overdose and you're given this medication in a quick enough time period, you can reverse these effects. At that point, the patient should always go to the hospital because the effects of the opiates can be longer than the effects of Narcan. Narcan's only going to last for 30 to 40 minutes, and it's going to wear off, and you don't know, as we just had a great description of what's in these pills. Some of the opiates might be longer acting, some of them are fentanyl are very short acting, but naloxone can definitely save a life in the context of an overdose.
Thank you. Any other specific message that you would share with parents in this community of, what they should do at home?
I would just, we have other experts here to talk about how to speak to your children and family members, but just how to be prepared is the only thing that I can, say at this point. To have Narcan, have the naloxone in your house, know how to use it. You can save, a family member's life, someone else's life. It's readily available now. The training, as you'll find out, is easy to do, and you can definitely, change and save someone's life by using it.
Thank you very much. We're going to turn to Adam Birkenstock now from LICAD. Thank you for being here, I wanted to just start by asking you specifically, as I said at the beginning, I'm a mom of 3 boys, college, high school, middle school, and I guarantee there are parents here that have, similar ages and maybe younger as well. Can you talk a little bit to parents about how to talk to their kids about this issue? Because that's what everybody needs to go home with that information.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that we hear often from parents, from families, from communities is how frightening a subject like this is, and it's hard to bring that fear that we have kind of living in us. I mean, watching that as a professional now in the field of 10 years, it brings up a lot of fear for me, for my clients, for my community, for my own family, and it's hard to take that feeling and then go home and talk to your kids and not want to just say, I'm locking you in your room, you're never allowed to go out again. If you get so much as something that looks like an Advil, you're not allowed to take it without me there. And all of these things are not the right thing to do. But it's hard because we want to. This is terrifying, right? It's such a scary thing to do. It's a scary world we live in. And something that I say a lot when I do presentations is I used to be able to a lot more easily say, scare tactics don't work, and here's what we do. And now the caveat I have to add is, unfortunately, this is really frightening now, which you heard in a lot of situations today already. This is a scary situation. But one of the things that we have to do, and like you mentioned, Allison, a lot of people have kids of different ages, is we start that conversation early and we have those conversations often. I, as a substance use professional, have spoken to audiences as young as 4th grade. And to be clear, I don't go to 4th graders and say, let's talk about fentanyl, but we talk about what is a healthy choice. What does it mean to make a healthy decision? What kind of decisions do you make day to day? How do we make time to just have conversations in the day? And can I see just show of hands if anyone has anyone in the elementary school or middle school? Yeah, so those kids want to talk to us a lot more often, right? Anyone who has a high schooler? Yeah, they don't want to talk to you, right? So that's where the challenge sometimes comes in, and why having that conversation early and often is really important. When I talk to 4th graders and they're like, I love chicken nuggets and I don't want to use drugs because drugs will, this is a longer conversation, but drugs make you like chicken nuggets less. Some of you guys have heard this from me before. High schoolers don't get motivated by that. But what's true of all of our kids is that as much as we want to make every choice for them, we can't make those choices for them, right? When I ask kids, who makes your choices for you, say sometimes reluctantly admit they have to make their own decisions, which is some part of what makes it scary. And what we can do is, from an event like this, from other events that we can go to from reliable sources online, we can get good information and share that information with our kids and have open conversations that are not just lectures, not just conversations, here's what I learned, what do you think about that, and there's a right answer, but it's a conversation that's, listen, I heard this about fentanyl, it's 50 times as strong as heroin. I want to talk about this with you. What have you heard? What do you know? What does this mean to you? Have you heard of people around you using, being hurt, dying? And be open to what your kid says. Because what often happens and what really tends to come out in these conversations is not just, what does my kid know? What might my kid be up to or into that I want to be concerned about? But is my kid dealing with anxiety I wasn't aware of? Is my kid dealing with depression I wasn't aware of? Is he worried about school and I didn't know because maybe we just haven't had that conversation? It's the stuff underneath that leads us to want to cope in an unhealthy way that really starts the issue, right? It was said in a different way in the movie, but nobody that I've ever spoken to as a drug and alcohol counselor comes to me and says, I really couldn't wait the first time I ever picked up a cigarette and then I later on had a drink. I was like, I cannot wait to be in an outpatient. No one thinks that. No one thinks that. People I've counseled after surviving an overdose do not think, yeah, I couldn't wait to overdose. Nobody wants that. What they think is, this drink is making me feel better. Weed is making me feel better. Heroin is making me feel better right now, even if it's only temporary and it doesn't seem to work. And by having these conversations early and often and letting them know the risks, the concerns, the side effects, they have much better information to make good health choices. The other big thing we can do by having these conversations early and often is also letting them know that you're someone they can talk to. The example I like to give is, no matter what, however bad you messed up, however drunk you are, high you are, no matter what rule you broke, you can call me, I will pick you up, I will make sure that you're okay. Is a good thing I tell all parents to say, as long as they can say it with a straight face, but to do it anyway, even if they can't say it with a straight face. Even if they're furious while they're saying it, you should say it. Because we need to be able to do that. The two kind of C words that I like to give to people is it's conversation and consequence. No matter what it is, when we are giving our kids, this is the consequence, this is what you can do, what you can't do at home. You're not allowed to drink at home, but if you call me and you're drunk, I'm going to pick you up and we're going to talk about it. And this is what's going to happen because this was a rule that you broke. So there's got to be a consequence. Whatever that consequence is should be just like it was when the kids were young and they didn't get a sticker. They got, a little in trouble because they threw a tantrum or whatever, however we were raising them at the time. It's got to be immediate. It's got to make sense. Maybe they got drunk at a party. They can't go out to that party. They can't go out to parties for a while. They're on lockdown for a week. More lockdown than we are in right now, right? But then the conversation is a part of that consequence. They have to talk to you. And especially once they get into high school, what I often tell parents is if they don't want to talk to you, if they feel uncomfortable, and as much as we hate to admit it, maybe the problem is with us, they don't want to talk to us, or they're mad at us, hey, do you want to talk to a therapist? Do you want to call someone else? Is there someone else you want to talk to? Do you want to talk to somebody at school? You guys have phenomenal supports at the school. Make sure the conversation is a part of the consequences of what's going on. Those are my biggest pieces.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. We'll save for questions at the end. I have one or two myself. Dan, thank you. Can you speak directly to
Is this one working?
Can you speak directly to what the school district is doing to address the fentanyl issue and how you're working with LifeHab as well?
Sure, yeah, so I'm so glad Adam could be here tonight. We've worked together for a long time. He's worked with North Shore for a long time. One thing that we are doing is Adam is going to come in March and put into some of our high school level classes and talk to students directly. And we wanted to do it less in an assembly format and more in classrooms in smaller groups so that it can be an interactive conversation between Adam and the students to talk about not only fentanyl, but a lot of what Adam just said in terms of reaching out if you need support, reconnecting them to the supports that we have in the building, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then with some of our lower grades, if you're not aware, Adam did do the 4th and 5th grade presentation earlier in the year where he talked about vaping, he talked about healthy decision making, so that did happen for all grade levels already as kind of one of our tier 1 interventions. But then for the lower grades, we asked LICAD to put together a PSA to share some of the information in less of a heavy-hitting fashion, but to give them some of the facts and figures about what fentanyl is and how it could impact you. And then on a district level, we have the Too Good for Drugs curriculum, which is a K through 12 evidence-based curriculum that's taught through all the health classes. It's taught in phys ed on the elementary level and through Mr. Carr, the health teacher, through the health curriculum in middle school, health curriculum in high school. And a piece of that curriculum is a explicit conversation with the students about safe medication practices. Do not take a pill that's not prescribed to you, what pills look like, how to have a conversation with your parents, if you find a pill, where to go with it, things like that. So those are conversations that have happened here, to speaking about pills that might be laced with certain things. And really, a big piece of what Adam talked about is from a prevention standpoint. We have district social workers that are trained at each level in prevention, one of which used to work with Adam at LICAD, Miss Berg in the high school. And we survey students every 2 years, and we're up to survey. We're going to do the youth development survey in March. And through that survey, it gives us feedback as to what substances students are using. It's an anonymous survey, so we hope the students are being honest with us. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. And that gives us information as to kind of where to go next with our prevention practices. Opioids have not been an issue for the high school students. We do see it, I think, after students graduate. As was referenced earlier, this can be in marijuana and other substances. So certainly things that we're still going to talk about. But really, best practices have been focusing on the risk and protective factors and partnering with CASA. I mean, we've done a lot to try to work with students on mental health. We have a big push, in the district about the trusted adult, so the piece that Adam talked to, really trying to make sure every student has someone they can go to in the building, whether it's a counselor, teacher, coach, social worker, psychologist, hall monitor, whoever it might be, really making sure they have that support. And then as Adam referenced, if you need support with your child in any way, shape, or form, reach out to one of us, whether it's me, a counselor, social worker, Mr. Contreras, Dr. McBrook, anybody who you feel comfortable reaching out to, please do that, and we're happy to help. In terms of training, all of our nurses district-wide are trained in Narcan training. The county is doing a virtual training tomorrow, actually, which is timely, being that we have this tonight. That a number of our staff is attending. Dr. Curris will be there, and some of our staff from the high school. I spoke with John Ahern, our head of district security, and we're planning on having all the security guards trained. A number of them have police background and have been trained already, but for those that aren't, we really are going to try to make a push to have as many people trained as we can, especially with the situation in Connecticut and in Riverhead. But we're trying to work with the students to make sure they have people to talk to in the building, educate them on all the various substances, including and especially fentanyl, making sure they have places to go. And from a curriculum standpoint, on the elementary level, we've rolled out Ruler, which is a social-emotional learning curriculum to teach students how to manage their emotions and who to go to. So we're really trying to help as much as we can. And I also just, on behalf of the district, want to thank CASA for these wonderful events and all the support that they offer us and everything they do for us throughout the year. So.
Thank you. Well, you beat me to it because I did want to say thank you to you, Dan. I'm killing these microphones. We work so closely together, and I really appreciate the partnership. And I want to say thank you to Eric Contreras and to Malbrook for working with us to put this event together tonight. So it's a great partnership, and we're really appreciative for it. So. Before we open it up to questions, I wanted to turn back to Lieutenant Landman because we had a little conversation before the event. I want to make sure that all of your thoughts are represented. You were sharing with me some things that you would want to impart to parents in this environment and why you think it's important. If I can put you on the spot.
I'm not as skilled as they are when it comes to the children, but you got to be invasive in your kids' lives. If you're not, or if you think you are being, you need to be more. You need to, I'm sure they don't pay for their own phones. You pay for them. Take their phones every once in a while. See who they're talking to. Check the conversations out. I'm not talking about every night, but I would scroll through and just see who they're talking to, know who they're hanging out with. It's all those people up there, they were never my kid parents. They didn't know. But they weren't educated, they didn't know. You guys have been educated now. A little bit. This is the tip of the iceberg. You guys have been educated. Don't be the never my kid parents. People say, oh, that'll never happen. Listen, none of those people ever thought it would happen to them. A lot of people are. I mean, just to touch on some of the things that everybody talked about, I've been to many overdoses. Many. The person's laying on the ground, they look like they're dead. And then about once a minute, they're taking a huge gasp. And then they sit there again, 30, 45 seconds, a minute, and then they'll take another gasp. It's frightening, it's scary, and I've been there. Doc sees them at the other end when they come to the hospital, and they're either brain dead or they're dead already. So I've seen them when they're, in the midst of their overdose. It's scary. Just I implore you to dive into your kids' lives. You don't want to be overbearing, can't lock them in a room or whatnot, but know who they're hanging out with and know who they're talking to. I'm not really that great with social media, with the Snapchat and whatnot, but you may not be able to see who they're talking to because of that if you don't know how to work it. But I'm sure there's I guess I should take the Snapchat for Dummies or something. I'm sure there's something along those lines out there that we can educate ourselves with that. But they're very savvy with the social media. Just from a
So I particularly want to talk about marijuana because, you know, it's legalized or semi-legalized, whatever the status is, but they're all smoking it as normally as you would drink a beer. So what do you do about that in terms of these cases of it being laced?
One of the things that I talk a lot about when it comes to marijuana is when I say get good information and share that information is when we hide information, when we give bad or partial information, the kids know they hear a ton of different things, and if they hear something that they know that we say is wrong, they stop listening to us. But a lot of what's happening with marijuana right now is they hear a lot of inaccurate information. And that's what I think is leading to a lot of what we see with marijuana. So one of the things that we've seen somewhat locally is kids thinking they're buying Delta 8, which is theoretically a new lab-made strain. If you were able to buy it at a lab, sure, that's what it would be. But you can't. There's not a recreational dispensary to buy it at. That would be later this year or next year. But kids don't do the research, don't know that, don't think that. And when I do these presentations, you can see them kind of sitting there and then they stop nodding as quickly and they're like, oh, right, I actually have to still be worried, I have to still think. It still could be lace, it could be something else. Or something that I buy at a corner store that I was told was an edible, who knows what the hell that is? It could be laced with something. And giving that good information and education can mean something like that, which is why, you know, we do these push-ins, which is why it's so important for kids to have this information and for you guys as parents to have this information. It's going to be very hard to imagine living in a world where this isn't happening, but to have kids that have the information, you're not going to go out and just buy safe weed overnight. You can't just trust the product you're buying, and this is why I know. That I've seen make a difference for kids who aren't going to change their mind overnight about smoking weed, but will maybe say, okay, I can't just go to a corner store and buy something that has a psychedelic print on it, which we as adults go, duh, but teens don't know this like we do. That I think is super, super important in terms of the health for our kids. It's just something I think is.
I think what other questions do we have?
Thank you. It's a question for the lieutenant, if you could. The demand is there. The supply seems overwhelming. So on a federal or state level, and more specifically on a Nassau County level, what is a step or solution to reducing the supply?
You took the supply of fentanyl? I don't have a good answer for you for that. It comes in many ways. It's walked across the border, it's shipped, it comes in internationally, it'll get shipped from one country to California, and then they'll repackage it, and they'll send it from California to New York, and then they can't open the package because it's coming from inside the United States. We do see packages, we see packages with thousands of press pills in them, and we're making progress, but it's the tip of the iceberg. I'll equate it to a tractor trailer coming across the border with 1,000 kilos of cocaine in it. And they're great, they're so happy with that seizure, but there were 50 other trucks that went and came across the border with it that day. That's a write-off for them. That one truck that they allowed to get seized. So I don't, as far as disrupting the chain, I would think that's more along the lines of the federal level. You know, we do our part in Nassau County. Sometimes we start at the low level and we make lower level arrests, and then we'll use that person to get to a dealer. Ultimately, they're not the real dealer, there's someone above them, and then there's someone above them. And then occasionally we get into upper levels of organization where we can take apart a specific organization of dealers. Unfortunately, when we do that, someone else typically steps in. You know, you cut the head off a hydrous, another one just takes its place. It's difficult, and I don't have an exact answer for you on that.
comment for the federal level. I work federal gang investigations, and I'll tell you that a lot of the street level dealing is coming from the gang members. So a lot of the stuff that they're selling is laced with fentanyl, and they are responsible for a lot of the overdoses that you're seeing. A lot of the gangs are operating all around Long Island. I don't particularly work Long Island like I used to, but I know that, for example, New York City, they had a map that was available to the public regarding where specific gangs are working. Does Nassau County Police have that available to the public? I know that you guys had at least a heroin overdose map a couple of years ago that was available to the public. Is that available today?
You talking about a map of where the gangs are operating in Nassau County?
Gangs are operating, and also where the overdoses are occurring.
Well, we have that information. I don't know if, I don't personally know if that's pub available or public consumption.
Yeah, I think that would be beneficial for everybody to know. I've seen every now and then you guys post like arrests of certain drug dealers or in the news, but whenever you have a lot of these fentanyl overdoses, it'd be worth to know where they're happening so we can be aware of where these drugs are being available and offered in the community.
Unfortunately, when we do make arrests, we don't publicize it. Particularly in my unit. We work kind of in the shadows, and because the one arrest we're going to make, we're going to look to make another arrest from that. So we're not going to publicize that we arrested someone when we're looking to go to arrest the person above them who is not only selling to them, but selling to 15 other people, the other dealers. So a lot of times the arrests we make are not publicized unless you can complete investigations to completion, and then there'll be some type of press release that's made. But on a regular basis, that's not really something that we publicize. If there was a rash of overdoses that we thought were linked, if we thought there was some type of solvability to it, we would probably put something out in regards to a public service announcement, but we would be looking to take serious action against the dealer, and we would move rather quickly on that.
There's another question down here. You go. You're loud.
I'll speak loud. I know that quite often when young people get together and they're engaging in activities they shouldn't be, if an overdose does occur, typically young people panic and abandon ship and all just run home, or they'll clean the place up and get rid of the drugs, get rid of the alcohol, open the windows to air the place out before they call 911, which quite often results in a death. Could you speak a little bit as to the Good Samaritan law that would protect young people and something that parents could speak to their kids about, that if they're ever in that situation, that they shouldn't panic and that they're not going to end up in jail?
Right, so there is a Good Samaritan law. So two friends are doing something they're not supposed to do, whatever it is, whatever drug they think they're doing there, and someone starts overdosing, like the gentleman said, they panic and they try and clean up, and then they want to call. But if they call 911 right away and there's paraphernalia and there's drugs, the person who called 911 is not going to be arrested. It's the Good Samaritan law. I mean, if there's a kilo there, I think it's going to be a different story, but just recreational drug use, it's not prosecuted. We cannot arrest them. So I think that something definitely should be discussed with the kids, that there's no need to sanitize a scene. It actually, it's harmful to an investigation even when they do that, because it just removes the solvability for us. A glassine envelope with a stamp on it that's thrown out, that we could link that to another overdose. So there could be overdoses that are linked that we might not even know because they're sanitizing a scene. But I think the important thing is that they cannot be prosecuted. They will not be arrested. So it's important for them to call 911. I'm sure Doc can attest to it. The sooner we get there, the sooner we can get Narcan and get them revived, the better chance they have.
And that goes to my second question to the doctor. When there is an overdose, what kind of time are you talking about you have to react to actually make a difference?
So to actually make a difference, it's very quickly. So after 10 minutes without your brain having oxygen is when you're starting to have, these irreparable damage to your brain and, internal organs. And the problem, like the lieutenant everyone spoke about before, is how potent, fentanyl is. So it is in fact a fentanyl overdose. The lieutenant was describing how this, the patient was breathing like one breath every 60 seconds. That's not enough, oxygen for your body to function. So during this whole time, your brain's not receiving oxygen, your heart, your other organs are all receiving damage. It's hard to quantify an exact time, but it's a matter of minutes, it's not hours. It's very quickly, and you want to get naloxone, Narcan, which is why it's so important to call, the police right away, so EMS, a police officer, can administer, naloxone to hopefully reverse the symptoms, but sooner the better. It's a matter of minutes, though.
More questions? I have two questions. So regarding to the...
It's not audible on the other side.
Regarding to the Good Samaritan law, even if the child is underage and under the influence, if they were to call 911, they will not be prosecuted?
No.
Okay, and as far as the Narcan, if God forbid something happens, you don't know if there's fentanyl in it. So hopefully there wouldn't be and you'll be able to reverse it. But in the case of fentanyl, will Narcan be helpful at all?
Yes, it's the same receptor that it acts on, so naloxone will reverse fentanyl as well.
Would a defibrillator, AED, shock help in any way, or has nothing to do with the heart? It's 100% respiratory.
No, so you're using an AED when there's cardiac arrest, so that's different. That's when your heart stopped functioning at that point. You're giving naloxone to reverse, the respiratory effects is what you're trying to do. If whoever it is does not have a pulse, then you want to put the AED on and it'll interpret the rhythm for you and tell you what to do next. But in an acute overdose, it's naloxone.
Can I just add, doctor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when I was naloxone trained, an important point is if it's not fentanyl and it's not an opioid and you give them naloxone, it won't harm them. Is that correct? So if you're wrong, go ahead, please.
No, sure. So when you're giving naloxone, you're giving these 2 milligram, like aliquots, as you'll be trained to give. So when you're giving 2 and 2, you're not gonna harm a patient like that with naloxone. Higher doses you can, but for this event, no. If you're just giving intranasal naloxone, you're not gonna harm the patient.
Well, first of all, thanks to the law enforcement, because it's got to be a pretty rough job going up every day, swimming upstream. So that's got to be difficult for you guys. But can you go into a little more how it's being distributed through social media? I mean, in my mind, I pictured a drug dealer standing on a corner, and now it seems like they're advertising in the open. So what are the controls, whether Facebook themselves shutting it down, or you guys intercepting and acting as a buyer? How does that work?
Typically, we'll have our detectives, they'll scour Snapchat, or they'll get information from someone about someone who's dealing on Snapchat, and we'll engage them. They'll create an account and they'll engage them that way. And but like the video said, they just put pictures out of what they have for sale.
Sure. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but as far as I know, Snapchat uses very specific like Tor filtering, which we don't have to go into what that is, but you can't track a lot of this stuff unless you're doing the kind of work you're doing, which is direct contact for the most part, unless you're working with Snapchat. So the broader comment I want to make is this work is super important, and you guys are doing it, right? What we need to do is get involved with CASA and with their families and all of that, because we're not going to solve the supply and demand problem within the next, and this I'm saying, you don't have to worry about this, within the next decade. But we can help our kids in the next year, in the next month. What I see as a public health educator is what we came out of was this NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard, it's not happening here. But then we start to think it's not gonna happen to my kid, or the responsibility is on police to end the supply and demand issue. And what we really need to think of is I can have a conversation with my kid that's gonna change their life. Someone in the school is gonna have a conversation that's really going to stick with them, and when they're about to make a bad choice, it's gonna change their mind. So those conversations are really going to be critical and important. It's not about that pill not being in front of them, it's about them choosing, because of those conversations, not to take it. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add one thing, I mean, you know your kids better than anyone. They've lived with you their whole lives. If you see something changing in them, they're hanging out with a different group of kids, they're in their room more often than they were before, they're withdrawing from you. You know, some of that is typical teenage behavior, but some of it, like if you have an inkling in your gut that something's off, call someone that, you know, in the school, call a counselor, call a social worker, have a conversation with them. It's not gonna hurt for you to say, hey, something's off here and I'm not really sure what it is. Is it gonna be a full-blown, you know, substance issue? Hopefully not, but it could be something that sometimes that's where it starts, right? Where someone's having, you know, a mental health issue and it goes in that direction, which kind of Adam talked about earlier. But we have great staff in the school that can help you with that, and if we can't help you, like it may be a conversation where you don't want someone in the school to talk to your child. We can also add, you know, we have people like Adam that we can refer people to that, you know, outside of the school that can support you and your child. So, you know, we can definitely support you in that area.
Any other questions, Maria?
If I can just add real quick, this is not a problem that we can arrest our way out of. We're way beyond that. It's not. It's not. In the meetings that I've had with the commissioner and chiefs and my job, education and awareness and nights like this is what we need. People need to know about how serious this problem is. It's not going away. It's not going anywhere. And as many arrests as we make and as many drug dealers as we arrest, it's not the solution to the problem. It's a multi-pronged. The drug problem is multi-pronged. You know, there's the enforcement end on my end. There's the prevention end, which, you know, through education and awareness, and then there's the addiction specialists for people that you know are in the midst of it and want to get out. Okay, but my big concern is this video and things like this. Kids that are just trying it and like they don't have a chance to use the resources to get out of addiction. They're just going to die. So I think that the more people that are made aware of this, and the better, like they were saying, the conversations we have with our kids and be involved in our kids and notice the small changes and all these things, we have to do that. That I think is the most important part, so that we can there are no further addicts, no future deaths and no future addicts. The addicts are there. We have the resources for them. We don't want any more. We don't want more deaths. We don't want more people getting hooked on drugs. I wish I didn't have a job. I wish I didn't have the job I have right now. I wish there were no more drugs. I could find something else to do in the police department. But that's not realistic. It is what it is. It's there, and we do our part to do what we can. But we cannot arrest our way out of it. It's not, the enforcement is a part of it, but it's not the solution. It's not the end all be all solution. And I think that us being here and discussing this and then going back and talking to our kids and talking to your friends and then talking to their kids, and if this is being, you know, if there's a video of this on their website and showing to other people, getting that video out there, I think that's a big step in the right direction.
And I guess I'm just wanting to, I want to do my part. I want to be sure that I'm really understanding the best things that I can say to a 12-year-old now, how that might differ from what you would say to a 15, 16, 18-year-old, and how to keep that conversation going with the school as well. Thank you.
So I think as our kids get older, we go through that difficult climb, like you're saying, and just like our kids are going through a difficult climb, of having to listen more and talk less, even there's so much we want to say at these critical points in their lives. There's a joke that I also often say, which is I have to try to make everyone a little bit more of a social worker every day, because this is what I do for my job, is I can't tell anyone what to do, and you know, that's what I said before. And we have to start doing that sometimes with our kids, of giving these suggestions. What do you think about this? What did you hear about this? What did you learn about healthy eating today? Because it's her decision now, right? That she's really owning that it's her decision. And by giving her a little more information, a little more feedback, a couple other things to think about drugs and alcohol and all that, and letting her kind of process that information, come to her own conclusions with your helpful information, with the scary stuff, with the less scary stuff, that lets her own the decision making, the information and all of that now. Whereas before it was, you know, Mom, what's this? Oh, okay, great. And it's just part of her worldview. Now she's got to know it, own it, and incorporate it. So we listen more, we suggest more than we tell as our kids get older.
I was just gonna say, sometimes it's not what you say, it's just having the conversation and listen, right? Like some of these things you can't fix, but as long as they know they have someone to come and talk to, and there's an ear for them to share what's on their mind, that opens up the door. When there is, let's just go, when there is a bigger issue, that they may come to you and talk to you about it, or share what's going on with their friends, and that's where you learn more. And just to piggyback on the phone piece, and I had in my notes, and she's here tonight, but we did hire a K through 12 social worker, Ms. Malice, who's here, so Samantha Malice is here. And one of the initiatives that we have been working on and discussed for the month of March is really focusing on a digital wellness month, and not connected to phones, because not everybody has a phone, but connected to kind of like your relationship with your screen or your phone, and how to have a healthy relationship with that. And then some of it goes back to like, yes, I agree, it would be great to say like no one's gonna have social media, but everyone does, and removing that is gonna be a huge, they're still gonna do it, you just wouldn't know about it, you know, so how do we do that in a healthy fashion? And, you know, the conversation that we had about Snapchat, I think educating kids on like, this exists on Snapchat, like what you see there is not fun and games, like this is a big deal, so. But the plan is to have Ms. Mouse push in middle school and high school, and then work with our elementary counselor on having those lessons kind of happen throughout the district. So kind of related but unrelated, but sometimes it's just about listening and not necessarily having an answer for everything. So
I'm going to jump in here. I'm sorry, Mr. Gutierrez, go ahead.
Okay. So I have, now it's not working for me.
Go this way.
No. Testing. Yeah, I think, so I thank you, first of all, Allison, the panel, Deputy Chief, thank you. I thank everyone here because it takes, I'm the principal of the high school, my name is Eric. It really takes concerted effort by everyone to embrace our kids collectively, parents, administrators, teachers, everyone. I think that, thank you, because these things have to be in person, and I don't want to, that's not a comment on anything other than our kids need, bringing the conversation to our kids in person. We have to get together, have these conversations in person. We have to watch these videos together. I have two technical questions. One is for the Dr. Olaf. One is, our nurses have naloxone here, and do you have, because I'm going to speak to them tomorrow, do you have a recommended amount for, we have 800 students. Now, if there were a group of students, God forbid, using it together, is there a recommended amount that you recommend? And the second clinical question is, do you advise that is oxygen availability also something that helps or not? Highly technical, excuse my ignorance. And the second medical technical question is, I know that with choking victims, sometimes they die because they go into the bathroom when they should be out in public. So is there a conversation to be had for me as a parent of 2 teenagers that if you did something in your room, come out, no questions asked, because I can help you right away instead of you staying shut in your room, afraid of what I might think. Is that a relevant medical conversation? And thank you everyone for being here.
Absolutely. So the first question you asked is very difficult, and how many naloxone kits, should you have? I believe the Department of Health has like a recommended amount. I believe so. I haven't checked the exact amount, but depending on how many people, it's like for public arenas and things like that. So I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head, but I believe there might be an estimate of how many kits you should have. And in terms of having oxygen available, so if you're able to help the patient respire, breathe, with like a bag mask valve, that patient would be fine. It's the problem is breathing. Naloxone is going to reverse the effects of the blunting of the respiratory depression, but if you have some sort of availability, the EMS, what they do when they get there and the least when they get there, is they immediately put a bag mask valve right on their face, which is the kind of bag on the end, and they kind of press it so they can kind of breathe for the patient. And that's what's going to reverse the effects right away. And it's even going to make the naloxone more effective because it's going to start to sensitize those receptors. So I'm not sure if that answers your question for that. And for your third question about, coming out of the room, when something happens, absolutely. So like as we saw in the video, I believe all of the cases were, a parent finding their child dead in their room, which has to be everyone's worst nightmare. So if any of them were, started to feel those effects, came out, potentially, they might have had a better outcome. Unfortunately, fentanyl does work so quickly, especially with like the opiate naive. But that's definitely a great conversation to have with your children, for them to come out whenever they have a problem, whenever they're not feeling well, to feel comfortable. Absolutely, that'd be something great to do.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap up this part of the evening. When we put this event together, we found all these fantastic experts, but I'm overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge here and all of the great information. And I just thank you all so much for what you've shared with our parents tonight. As far as the film Dead on Arrival, yes, thank you. As far as the film Dead on Arrival goes, North Shore CASA is going to put it on our website. I'm going to put it right on the homepage starting tomorrow. It's the first thing I'll do in the morning. We leave it to your parental discretion, whether or not you want to show that to your children. Of course, as the lieutenant said, we would have loved it if this room was full tonight, but it is not. But you've all been given valuable information. You are all armed now with great information. What we ask at North Shore CASA is that you go out, you share with your friends, with your parent friends, what you got from this event. Encourage them to come to the next event, talk about this, share the information. It's incredible. That's how we can make a difference. One parent talking to another parent, talking to another parent, joining our organization, becoming a member, and coming to these events.